My beloved, do you think it's an accident that you're hearing my voice right now? No. Heaven planned this moment long before you took your first breath. Here on Holy Voices, we share the whispers of eternity, the messages that change hearts and awaken destinies. If your soul is ready, stay with me, because what you're about to hear might be the very word your spirit has been waiting for. Every subscription is a yes to faith. Help us reach 40,000 by pressing subscribe, liking, and leaving your amen below. There has been a significant change in the spiritual world, and every once unbreakable foundation is about to be shaken by the reverberations. The same people who rejected you, made fun of your vision, and created whole personas based on disproving you. They're going through something they didn't anticipate. Their meticulously crafted masks are dissolving in real time as a result of this profound and unavoidable reckoning. Those times when you quietly and firmly stated your truth. They were unable to comprehend your vision when you conveyed it with unwavering assurance and when you moved with a confidence that came from a deeper source than reason or evidence. They were therefore perplexed by your groundedness in the absence of outside validation. They were unsettled by your calm in the middle of their commotion. Your refusal to compromise yourself for their comfort put everything they believed about value and power at jeopardy. This is what they overlooked, though. In waves of devastating revelation, they are only now starting to understand. You weren't acting. No, you weren't acting. You have no intention of persuading anyone. All you were doing was being yourself. Walking in a way that is so genuine that it unintentionally reveals all of the facades around you. It's the storm they've been fearing. It also looks just like you. For people who confuse sincerity with weakness, Toronto Bench is available. Who conflate naivete with grace. Who believe that a lack of power equated to quiet strength. They saw you handle difficulties with an unfathomable level of poise. React to provocation with a wisdom that thwarted their efforts to minimize you and uphold standards that, from their skewed viewpoints, seemed unachievable. Your constancy was what most troubled them. You stayed steadfastly you, even as they changed, adjusted, and performed various versions of themselves for various audiences. This was not obstinacy. It was sovereignty. This was not rigidity. Since they had long since exchanged their true identities for acceptance, they were unable to access the frequency at which integrity was operating. Your very presence turned into a mirror that they were unable to break, avoid, or rationalize. They had to face the hollowness of their own identity, the instability of their own foundation, and the performance-based character of their own confidence every time they interacted with you. You made no attempt to reveal them. Without any effort on your part, your truth made that work. On the presumption that you were too idealistic for real-world success, too soft for the real world, or too pure for the kind of power that matters, they constructed entire identities around you. They wanted you to fail. Your achievement would dispel all the falsehoods they had told themselves about what it takes to succeed in this world, not because they personally detested you. They never realized that you were more than just a person in their orbit, selected one. You were a spiritual test disguised as a human being, a celestial checkpoint. Your existence in their lives was never coincidental, purely coincidental, or random. You were put there by forces they couldn't see in order to show something about their moral fiber, their discernment, and their capacity to spot holy objects in everyday packaging. They turned down your invitation to grace. Instead of facing you, they shattered your wisdom like a mirror. Their instability was exposed by your standard of constancy. Every encounter with you presented a chance to develop, learn, and change, but they opted for derision rather than inquiry, rivalry rather than cooperation, and rejection rather than wisdom. The sorrow goes beyond the fact that they failed to see your value. It's because they failed to see the lesson you taught, the development you provided, and the advancement you exemplified. Although you weren't there to educate them in the conventional sense, anyone who was humble enough to watch and learn may benefit from your sheer presence. They witnessed real power in action up close. And rather than learning the skill, they critiqued the outfit for the duration of the performance. However, the cosmos is humorous. Something quite else was going on behind the scenes while they were occupied with developing complex theories about your shortcomings, boldly foretelling your demise. and bolstering their sense of superiority on the basis of your expected failure. Their time frame was not the same as yours. Their scoreboard wasn't the source of your validation. Their approval was not a requirement for your promotion. In worlds they couldn't see, the precise plan they derided as impractical, too spiritual, and too lofty for someone like you was being endorsed by God. Every chance that presented itself without your effort, every door that seemed to open for you out of the blue, and every bond that developed organically and powerfully. It wasn't a coincidence. These were affirmations of what you had always knew but had been prudent enough to avoid defending, secure enough to avoid proving, and patient enough not to demand. When good fortune came your way, they termed it luck. When your patience paid off, it was referred to as timing. When the heavenly orchestration became clear, they dubbed it connections. Everything except the truth had an explanation. That you were who you claimed to be, using the power you had subtly asserted, and striding with the kind of purpose others wrote off as fiction. However, this is where their blindness becomes very unacceptable. You never concealed your identity from them. You frequently expressed your reality as a warning, not to brag. You constantly exhibited your values out of integrity rather than to impress. You were honest about your vision, not to persuade but to be true to yourself. However, they saw your peace as passivity, your confidence as haughtiness, and your openness as pretense. The language of striving and performing was not used in the plan you carried. It was written in the old language as preparation and trust, patience and divine timing, alignment and surrender. You were creating something in the invisible world that would materialize in ways they could never predict or duplicate while they searched for proof of your shortcomings. Since they were unable to identify your source, they ridiculed your tactics. Because they were unable to see the flawless orchestration taking place behind the scenes, they made fun of your timeline. Because they had never known the kind of knowing that comes from being linked to something bigger than popular opinion and market trends, they disregarded your confidence. Just picture the exact moment when your true truth meets their manufactured world. Not slowly, not softly, but with the power of an epiphany that cannot be denied, or denied. They stand in the wreckage of their own poor judgment as everything they were sure of about you falls apart at once. It turns out that the individual they identified as too sensitive had a commanding level of emotional intelligence. The person they rejected as being overly idealistic exhibits a knowledge that deftly navigates complexity. A vision so clear, so powerful, so inevitable that it changes everything around it is displayed by the dreamer they ridiculed for being unrealistic. However, this goes beyond simply their error. This concerns their loud, public, repetitive, and completely confident errors. They didn't simply think poorly of you in secret. They ran an anti-you campaign. They didn't doubt you in private. To share their blindness, they enlisted others. They did more than just undervalue you. On the presumption that you would never become what you claimed to be, they based their entire sense of value. Their campaign was not the result of constructive criticism or sincere disagreement. It was realism masquerading as character assassination. They misrepresented your difficulties in conversations, misrepresented your statements at events, and sowed doubt before you were even able to speak for yourself. They required a chorus for their cynicism, an army enlisted in their blindness, and an audience for their dismissal. Their resistance was more harsh because it was public. They had more than simply personal doubts. They flaunt how certain they are of your limitations. They had more trouble comprehending your strategy than that. For everyone to hear, they proclaimed it to be seriously faulty. Your timeline wasn't the only thing they questioned. With prophetic confidence, they foresaw your failure. They are now going through something more terrible than just humiliation. Their ability to read people, events, and spiritual realities has completely collapsed, and they are struggling with it. What else in the world around them have they utterly misread if they were this wrong about you, someone they closely observed, regularly engaged with, and formed strong opinions about? This is the point at which the realization hurts them the most. Something else becomes painfully clear as your true gifts and actual power become indisputable and show up in ways that cannot be minimized or denied. They have been making an effort to claim what was never theirs. It is now evident that all of the times they examined your answers, imitated your behaviors, took your ideas, and passed them off as their own discoveries, they were actually shadows standing too near the flame and mistaken proximity. For ownership. In the hopes that no one would distinguish between imitation and originality, they attempted to construct their persona around the bits of your true self. However, authenticity has a power source that cannot be perpetually faked, a resonance that cannot be produced, and a signature that cannot be falsified. You were continuing to develop from that same source, becoming more and more, reaching heights of truth and power they couldn't even see, much less duplicate, while they were acting out what they saw in you. Since it was never designed for their head, the crown they attempted to wear never fit. Since it was not based on their true calling, the authority they tried to assert never felt right. Since their attempted confidence was unrelated to their true foundation, it always felt forced. The difference between real and fake now becomes glaring as your own nature becomes unavoidable. They're not simply misinformed about you. They are discovered wearing garments that were never made to fit their true selves, exposed in their borrowed glory and inauthenticity. When you give with joy, heaven records it. Your seed in holy voices is eternal, Philippians 4 verse 17. Their entire reputation was built upon denying your reality, which is a painful irony they now have to face. Some people built their entire sense of worth on the idea that you wouldn't succeed. You were more than a member of their social group. To feel better about themselves, they used you as a yardstick. The standard that gave them a sense of superiority, the point of comparison that supported their decisions. As long as you seemed like you were struggling, perplexed, or doubtful in any way, they were comfortable where they were. They didn't only find your apparent failure pleasing. It was essential to their mental stability. The fact that you harmed them did not make them dislike you. They were afraid of what you might turn into. The chance that all of their preconceived notions about spiritual power, achievement, and strength might be totally incorrect. They became anxious whenever you showed fortitude in the face of their derision. They were agitated every time you remained calm while they projected their pandemonium. They sensed something untouchable about you deep within their souls. Something that functioned differently, something that was not negligible by their skepticism or annihilated by their rejection. It turns out that the individual they wrote off as foolish is actually acting with wisdom they are unable to access. They can't equal the strength displayed by the person they categorized as weak. A reality they cannot explain is manifested by the dreamer they ridiculed as unrealistic. It's painful to laugh at, but the true comedy is how clear it should have been from the beginning. Your calm in the midst of chaos wasn't a coincidence. It was mastery. It wasn't passivity when you didn't participate in their drama. It was a plan. It wasn't pretense when you upheld standards people couldn't comprehend. They were getting ready for levels they couldn't imagine. Since they had never functioned from that level themselves, they were unable to perceive the strength in every attribute they mistakenly believed to be weakness. There was an emptiness in your stillness. Knowing when to stop talking was a sign of wisdom. You weren't resigned by your patience. It was faith in the timing of God. You weren't naive in your elegance. It was so secure that it could afford to be giving. They believed they were interacting with someone who was ignorant of the true nature of the world, when they were actually meeting someone who knew how it works on a level they had never reached before. They thought you were impractical because of your spirituality, but in reality, it made you more effective than their worldly tactics could ever be. The worst thing that's happening to them right now is that they've turned you into an intractable puzzle. They are completely bewildered and unable to stop thinking about you, not out of admiration. In their mental ledger, you are the mathematical issue that won't balance. The phenomenon that deviates from their conception of the dynamics of power and people. The image of you they created in their minds. Their perception of themselves as naive, weak, unpractical, and doomed to fail does not align with the reality they are witnessing. They are being tormented by this separation with an almost obsessive tenacity. They try to comprehend how they could have been so completely incorrect about someone they were so sure they had figured out by replaying every conversation, re-examining every interaction, and recalculating every assumption. This goes beyond simple academic interest. It is mental suffering. They are caught in a never-ending cycle of attempting to make sense of their certain assessments and your evident sincerity, as well as their certain predictions and your indisputable results. Their initial disdain seems more absurd with each day that goes by as a result of your ongoing rise. Their predictions of your failure appear more ludicrous with each new door that opens for you. They are now realizing that you never had to prove anything in this situation. They were never your competitors. You didn't ever want their approval. You never wanted to change their views or get their acceptance. Simply put, you were living your life with such constant honesty that their preconceived notions were unable to withstand extended exposure to your reality. They based their identity on your projected shortcomings, their superiority on your presumed limitations, and their confidence on your apparent failures. However, illusion-based foundations are unable to sustain the weight of reality indefinitely. If lie is demonstrated and embodied, then everything built on it falls apart. Others are now seeking counsel from the same person they believed needed their direction. The person they thought lacked practical skills turns out to have unfathomable ability. Others use the dreamer, whom they rejected as unimportant, as a yardstick for sincerity. Although that is an inevitable consequence, this reversal is not taking place to teach them a lesson. Although that's an inevitable outcome, this realization isn't happening to prove you right. Truth is just the inevitable result of time bringing to light what was always there but momentarily obscured from those who lacked the eyes to see it. It's not only that they were mistaken about you that is the most heartbreaking part of their understanding. They were mistaken about who they were. It has become clear that their entire paradigm for comprehending worth, intelligence, success, and power is essentially faulty. What does it say about their capacity to make correct judgments if someone they so boldly dismissed had traits they were unable to identify? They are experiencing a crisis of competence that extends beyond their poor assessment of you. They are questioning their perceptions of what true power feels like, what true wisdom sounds like, and what true strength looks like. Each time they've interacted. Now, every choice they've made and every premise they've worked under is questionable. If they could be so mistaken about someone they paid close attention to, how many more facts have they overlooked? How many more chances have they passed up? How many more real souls have they ignored or undervalued? It is starting to become clear how blind they are. Furthermore, it goes beyond only their misinterpretation of you. They're coming to terms with the fact that their judgment, discernment, and vision have been clouded. The ramifications go well beyond this particular discovery. They cover every facet of their experiences navigating opportunity, relationships, and spiritual realities. The predicted yet pitiful part of their reaction is now upon us. They are trying to control the consequences through different damage control measures after realizing how big of a mistake they made. Because they are driven more by image management than by sincere regret, the apologies that sound empty. The unexpected acknowledgement that occurs right after people realize how valuable you are. Efforts to change history to make their opposition seem less outspoken, less self-assured, and less visible than it actually was. However, sincerity endures. Furthermore, truth has flawless recollection. All of their contemptuous remarks are ingrained in the memories of people who heard them. Their self-assured predictions on your limitations are proof of their spiritual blindness. Their character's permanent record documents every instance in which they opted for mocking over curiosity, cynicism over openness, and projection over perception. Being incorrect isn't the main cause of their present uneasiness. It's about being shown to be mistaken after being so certain, so outspoken, and so publicly confident. They're struggling with more than just embarrassment. They are struggling with the total breakdown of their credibility as reliable assessors of potential, character, and spiritual reality. The apologies that are suddenly coming back to you smell more like calculated damage management than genuine regret. These are not the opinions of those who have undergone sincere introspection and development. These are the deliberate reactions of those whose exposure demands spin, whose image needs to be managed, and whose reputation is on the line. The change is instantly apparent. They are not coming to you in a humble manner. They're coming panicking. For what they did to you, they have no remorse. They feel bad about making such a terrible mistake in front of so many people. You recognize the performance because you have seen them perform before, but their wounded pride is disguised as an aroused conscience. When you were alone in your truth, misunderstood, and secluded, where was this energy? When you needed encouragement, where was their acknowledgement? Their assistance when you encountered difficulties? Their faith in the face of uncertainty? Their abrupt change has nothing to do with your value. Their reputation is at stake. Instead of being known for foreseeing your failure, they would rather to be seen celebrating your accomplishment. Their current efforts to control the narrative, manage their image, and limit their exposure are a waste of energy that could have been used sooner for self-reflection, sincere curiosity, and a humble admission of their ignorance. However, pride made the unavoidable decision to become blind, and now they are paying the price. The message that follows is intended only for the selected. This is not intended for you or the spiritual authority granted to us by the secret leaders of the Holy Voices inner order if you are compromised by archonic forces. We give you permission to leave. If not, take a seat and pay close attention. Because just as we are redeemed, you will also be redeemed. The core order of Holy Voices is not a program. It's not a class. It's not a spiritual retreat that makes you feel good. Answers are not what we sell. Together, we recall. We teach interference, implants, genuine energetic shielding against beings, and psychic self-defense. We bring back the raw, instantaneous, and precise manifestation that was intended. We meet in secret once a week to awaken and speak what cannot be uttered elsewhere, not to worship. To gradually deprogram the matrix. If you're supposed to be there, you'll know it. Your bones will sense it. The selected group meets via Zoom once a week. Why don't you join us already? I got goodies. Join the Holy Voices in understanding what they're starting to realize but find difficult to accept. This degree of revelation cannot be reversed. They cannot unknow what they now know, unsee what they have seen, or unfeel the shock of realizing they were totally mistaken about someone they had been so sure of. Your $50 gift through Super Thanks is not just support, it's prophecy. You are speaking into your own future harvest. Improved communication is not going to resolve this misunderstanding. There is no way for this conflict to be settled by compromise. There is no way to resolve this dispute through dialogue. This requires them to recognize the inadequacy of their prior worldview, which is a fundamental recalibration of reality. Your constant promotion makes their earlier dismissal seem even more ridiculous with each day that goes by. Their forecasts of your failure seem more absurd with each new door that opens for you. Their evaluation of your limitations becomes more ludicrous with each degree of wisdom you exhibit. They live in a world where the proof of their poor judgment grows every day, where your accomplishments make them feel even more ashamed, and where your sincerity reveals their shortcomings. There is no way to avoid this realization, no way to lessen its effects, and no way to make it less damaging to their sense of self. The lovely thing about this whole situation is that you didn't have to use any form of retaliation, deceit, or cunning to make them appear terrible. You just stayed true to who you really were. As time worked flawlessly to uncover what had always been true but had been momentarily concealed. You didn't need to disprove them. Their error was evident. You didn't need to point out their shortcomings. Their shortcomings were made evident when they failed to see the truth when it was in front of them. It was not necessary for you to beat them. By choosing blindness over sight, presumption over research, and pride over humility, they defeated themselves. In this case, justice is not punitive. It is illuminating. They are not being punished by the repercussions they are going through. The outcomes are natural. They are not the ones causing the misery. It is the unavoidable result of constructing one's identity around erroneous assumptions about both oneself and other people. In this way, the cosmos preserves equilibrium without requiring victims to become perpetrators. How truth speaks for itself without the need of advocates. How genuine power manifests itself without requesting acknowledgement. Truth came to light in its own time and strength because of the very traits they ridiculed in you, your patience, your serenity, and your refusal to impose results. Throughout all of this, a profound aspect of your character has been revealed that surpasses their awareness, or lack thereof. Your capacity to stay composed in the face of misunderstanding, to uphold your principles in the face of criticism, and to have faith in your vision in the face of derision. These are not merely commendable traits. They demonstrate a level of spiritual maturity that functions without the need for outside approval. Since you weren't looking for anything from them, you were never proving anything to them. Since you weren't playing their game, you were never in a competition with them. You weren't threatened by their restrictions, thus you weren't ever protecting yourself from their attacks. This whole event has shown you how secure you are, how powerful you are, and how wise you really are. You were just being yourself, regardless of how you were received, whereas they were acting out different versions of themselves to win favor. You were strolling in blatant genuineness while they were building complex facades to cover up their fears. There is no denying the difference now. Furthermore, it's not just about varying degrees of success. It has to do with various sources of identity, various bases of self-assurance, and various ways of being. They were relying on outside verification. Internal alignment was what gave you strength. They wanted to be accepted. You were being genuine. Contrabandial. We return to the basic idea that began it all in this moment of ultimate revelation. Demonstration is the path to truth. Authenticity is the conduit for power. Presence is the manifestation of reality. Their initial dismissal of their silent strength has turned out to be more potent than all of their noise. All their turmoil has been outweighed by the tranquility they were unable to comprehend. All of their reasonable predictions have turned out to be less prescient than the vision they derided as impractical. You're who you claim to be. You were always. Your lack was never the reason they couldn't see it. It has to do with their limitations. It was never your deficiency that caused others to fail to see your true power. The subject was their blindness. Your trajectory was never the source of their faith in your failure. It had to do with their incapacity to effectively interpret spiritual reality. Though not in the manner they anticipated, the storm they thought you would become has definitely arrived. It isn't a storm of retaliation or revenge. It is an unquestionable, overwhelming, and all-encompassing storm of truth that destroys all erroneous presumptions, flawed judgments, and faulty foundations. To disprove them, you didn't change who you were. The fact that you grew more authentically yourself was sufficient to show them how mistaken they had always been. You didn't alter who you were to fit their mold. Their expectations were revealed to be projections because of the genuine way you conveyed your personality. You are not the metamorphosis. It's when they acknowledge the things that have always been true about you. It's not about who you've become that's revealed. It's about the person you've always been that they couldn't see. And now, while they sit in the quiet of their broken certainty, as they struggle with the consequences of their grave error, as they try to comprehend the extent of their spiritual blindness, you move on unaffected by their late recognition, unmoved by their realization, and unaffected by their recognition. Because you were always obvious about who you were without others seeing you clearly. Their approval of your path was never necessary. To grasp your goal, you never demanded their comprehension. You are the chosen one, just as you claim to be. You were and always were. Your reality remains unchanged despite their acknowledgement of this fact. It simply reveals every detail of their prior restriction. Never was the crown borrowed. The power was never used. It was never fake wisdom. They finally, unavoidably, and unquestionably know it now. Beloved soul, if this message has spoken to your heart, don't let it end here. Click that like button so the light can spread to more people who need hope. Subscribe to Holy Voices so you never miss the next word heaven has for you. And leave a comment below. I read every one, and I pray over them. Remember, faith grows when we share it, so share this message with someone who needs to hear it today. Until we meet again, may God's peace cover you and His voice guide your every step.